Rutgers versus Nebraska against the Cornhuskers, against the Corn Men. 4:00 p.m. over on FS1. Don't know who's on the call. Don't care. I don't really pay attention to who's on the call. But if people have opinions about announcers, just mute it if you don't like them. It's America. You can do what you want to an extent. 4 p.m. over at FS1. The line on this game is Nebraska -7, and I feel like, honestly, that's a pretty good line. The Vegas guys all know what they're doing, of course. The biggest question for me, and I think the biggest question for anybody in this one, of course, is can Nebraska contain Kyle Monangai? This is kind of a case of unstoppable force meets immovable object, to go down that corny. See what I did there? Cornhuskers. Corny analogy. Kyle Monangai so far this season, 32nd in yards per carry at 6.07, though. So he's only 32nd, but there's a lot of running backs around this country that are tearing up college football. By the way, I know they're not Big Ten, but Boise State, Ashton Jeanty, if you haven't heard of that guy or watched that guy yet, Boise State is averaging 8.5 something yards per carry. Ashton Jeanty should be in the Heisman conversation, but I don't know if you all are ready for that yet. Are you all ready for that conversation yet? I'm not sure. But again, unstoppable force, immovable object. Nebraska, 15th in run defense, giving up just 2.75 yards per carry given up, and they were 8th. At last check, they were 8th in SP plus defense. I've been saying it so far this season. They've got some good defensive backs over there. I'm blanking on names right now. Yes, Frank Corone, prayers to the hurricane victims. I should have opened with that. I know Uncle Lou, one of the bigger college football YouTubers out there, was having some issues, had some unfortunate things going on. And yes, RIP to Pete Rose. Pete Rose, unfortunately, passed away earlier today. And I'm just going to add one more in there. Chris Christopherson, RIP, big man. Love the rubber ducky. If you're not familiar with the movie Convoy, did you even grow up in the 80s or 90s? Anyway, I have to remember where I was at here. Nebraska's defense, 8th in SP plus last time I checked. Been saying it all year. They are an underrated defensive unit. Now, of course, they haven't played the best quality of competition so far this season, the highest quality competition in some regards, but this team played Colorado, who just laid it on some lesser competition themselves, and they played Illinois, who, as we saw in that Penn State game, incapable of scoring points against better defenses, but looked like a pretty tough team in that Penn State game. So Nebraska's defense, I think, is in some ways legit. Do I think that they're elite of elite? Do I think that they're up there with the team that we just talked about in the Ohio State Buckeyes? Absolutely not. But their run defense is pretty good so far this season. Rutgers has to be multifaceted against this Nebraska defense. If they try to hand the ball off to Kyle Monangai 30, 35 times and give him like a Blake Corum level of carrying capacity in this game, I don't think they're going to be able to pull it off. Again, Ethan Kaliakmanis, not the world's best thrower of the football. So I don't know if Rutgers will be able to pull this game off without Ethan Kaliakmanis being able to make some throws downfield. Now, they do have a really great receiver over there, pretty good receiver. They got that like 6'6" guy whose name I'm blanking on at the moment. I'm not great with names, by the way. I have to admit, as a new host of the show, you're going to hear me blank on names all the time. I apologize. It happens. I'll do my best to describe it. If you're a fan of the team, you probably know what I'm talking about anyway, because there's probably only one receiver on Rutgers that's 6'6". So there you go. Rutgers, I think, has to be really multifaceted in this game. And the interesting thing to me is Rutgers, speaking of run defense, speaking of Big Ten football, running the football, converting third downs. Football isn't all that complicated of a sport, by the way, people. It is, but it isn't. We'll talk about that sometime if you're ready for that. Rutgers themselves are 98th in the country, and especially playing kind of like the competition they face, Virginia Tech and some other lower level competition. 98th in the country is pretty bad. They're giving up 5.91 yards per rush. So my question really for Nebraska in this game, and I think it was really interesting to me, by the way, going back to that Nebraska-Illinois game, I really thought Nebraska was going to start out running the football in that game. First year starting quarterback, decent to good, pretty good offensive line. You know, they got some ability to run the football, of course, with Ramir Johnson and Dante Dowdell. I thought they'd open up that game and run the football, establish the run, get the play action going for their first-year quarterback, and they came out and they just slang the ball all over the yard. Slung the ball all over the yard. And they really put that game in Dylan Raiola's hands. And now we saw down the line, Dylan Raiola made some mistakes in that game. I believe he threw an interception. In fact, I know he threw an interception now that I think about it. And Illinois was able to win that game. If Nebraska, against this Rutgers defense, which, by the way, has some pretty good corners, they have a defensive end who can get pressure in Aaron Lewis. They have some pretty good linebackers. If Nebraska does the same thing in this game and just puts the ball in Dylan Raiola's hands too often and puts the game on his shoulders, I think you may have another situation in this one where Rutgers is able to keep it close and able to maybe pull one out late. Because as we all know, what does Nebraska do? Nebraska. It's a verb on my channel. And on my channel over on Darren Talks Ball, Nebraska-ing is a verb. It's what they do. They lose close games. Something like 3-28 or something like that in close games over the past few seasons in one-touchdown games. They've really got to let Dante Dowdell and Ramir Johnson cook. I literally have it in my notes right here. Cook, underlined. They have to. 98th run defense in the country. Do you hear me? What's his name? Matt Rule. Do you hear me? Do you hear what I'm saying right now? Run the ball, establish the run for your quarterback, protect your quarterback, and I have that underlined here to protect Raiola. I do think Nebraska wins this game, but again, Rutgers is a tough team, and as we've seen, this conference is deeper and more competitive than a lot of people give it credit for. Seven teams, by the way. If you see my hands there, 7 teams in the AP poll this week.